I had a conversation this morning with someone who asked me whether or not politicians in Britain were worse today than they were when I was younger. And the point is that I think it's probably true that each generation thinks its politicians are worse than the last. Churchill bemoaned the loss of statesmanship. Thatcher bristled at what she called wet conservatism. Blair, before walking out to a standing ovation, sighed about the mediocrity left behind. Yet here we are today with Badenoch, Starmer, Patel, Hunt. Are they the dregs of democracy or merely the latest victims of our impossible expectations? First of all, we need to dispense with nostalgia. Churchill himself admired people like Gladstone and Disraeli, Victorians who, with their sweeping reforms, set a bar so high it could only ever be romanticised. Thatcher cited Winston Churchill, but had little patience for Churchill's dithering. She liked decisiveness, not cigars. Blair admired Clinton, a man who could charm his way out of a scandal in one breath and into NATO talks in the next. And today's crop, they speak longer but they say less. They've mastered a rhetoric so polished it barely resembles English. Chris Bryant, with his relentless championing of parliamentary propriety, may be the exception. His speeches at least seem alive with a touch of Norman St. John Stevens's wit. Yet even he, we suspect, might prefer an extended Westminster Hall debate on etiquette to tackling the real monsters, policy and accountability. One cannot ignore Rory Stewart in this conversation, a man whose ministerial career involved overseeing prisons he knew nothing about, uttering lines like, "The flood walls are working well, the water is just coming over the top." Yet somehow his bewildered earnestness makes him the best of us, an accidental mascot for decency in the middle of chaos. So, why this decline, real or perceived? Some point to the electoral system, which rewards sound bites over substance. Proportional representation might open doors for smaller parties and fresh voices, but it would also invite more niche eccentricity, giving us an entire chamber of Jacob Rees-Moggs debating the finer points of Victorian grammar and showing off with their sesquipedalian vocabulary. I think proportional representation allows the debate about who aligns with whom to take place in the chamber of the House of Commons rather than in the back rooms of the Reform Club or wherever the Conservatives or the Labour or the Reform UK groups are going to start manufacturing their broad base of a party. Others argue that today's MPs lack real-world experience. In the 1970s, you'd find miners like Dennis Skinner, teachers, even railway guards on the benches. Now, Westminster is a finishing school for spads, councillors, university debaters. Parliament has become less the crucible of national experience and more a club of well-connected insiders climbing a ladder designed by and for themselves. But the job itself bears some defence. The hours are dreadful, the pay unimpressive compared to head teachers or GPs, and the constituents relentless. The selection process involves convincing people who you'd rather not share a dinner table, with whom you'd rather not share a dinner table, let alone your evenings. And then there's the public. They demand accessibility. MPs now spend weekends in their constituencies, answering emails faster than a customer service bot, yet also despise what they call career politicians. Money, of course, complicates everything. The cash for access scandals of Jack Straw and Malcolm Rifkind linger in the collective memory, painting MPs as greedy when many, ironically, are underpaid compared to the scrutiny that they endure. And let's not mention the expenses scandal, proof, as Harold Wilson feared, that allowances would tempt abuses of duck house proportions. So where does this leave us? Are today's MPs really so bad? Objectively, perhaps not. Norman St. John Stevens would appreciate Chris Bryant's procedural rigour. Rory Stewart's podcast reveals more insight than some manifestos, and even Priti Patel, diverse though she may be, channels a Thatcherian decisiveness, albeit occasionally, generally, misapplied, misunderstood, maladroit. The collapse of character in politics, then. So this isn't about whether or not I agree with somebody's political position. This is about whether or not they're up to the job. I don't agree with Priti Patel. But is she up to the job? Well, that's a matter for discussion. And the collapse of character in politics may be less about individual failure and more about the dysfunction of the system itself. Until we reform how MPs are selected, compensated, judged, we will continue to attract and deserve what one might call the anxiously ambitious. Politicians may be a little mad to want the job, but perhaps we are equally mad to expect saints where we've paved a way for opportunists. But before we despair, remember Churchill's advice. Success is not final. Failure is not final. It is the courage to continue that counts. So really what we should hope for is the courage of today's MPs and the hope that they may still surprise us. Or at the very least, let's hope that there will be fewer duck houses.